I'm just going to go ahead and admit it. I am a Star Trek fan. I love all of the various Star Trek series that have been created over the years, but like most fans, I'm going to have to admit, there is a soft spot in my heart for the original Star Trek series. In fact, I was wondering, would you mind if I tell you my favorite Star Trek episode of all time? It's the one that starts like this. The Starship Enterprise arrives at a planet where there's something going on. And as a result of this, Kirk, accompanied by some senior officers and at least one junior officer, beam down to the planet. You can always tell the junior officer he's wearing a red uniform. A few minutes later, the guy in the red shirt is killed, which indicates that actually the Starship Enterprise is facing a serious threat. But then you see Kirk, using his own ingenuity, somehow gets the Starship Enterprise out of their trouble, and then the episode ends with Kirk and Dr. McCoy and Mr. Spock talking together about how illogical human beings are. Did you ever see that episode? Well, those of you who are not fans, I'll explain why others are laughing, because you see, if you're at all a fan of Star Trek, you will know that that episode I just described to you is actually not the plot of just one episode, but about half of the episodes of the original Star Trek, excuse me, the original Star Trek series. I got something stuck, sorry. You see, the reason for that is because the original Star Trek series made use of something called plot formulas. Basically, what they did was they told the same story over and over again and just changed the characters, changed the situations. And it's one of the reasons why the series was so successful. Somehow, using this formula over and over again, the writers of the series were able to bring out these key points that they were trying to make about the cleverness of Captain Kirk, about what was special in human nature, about their ideas of where human beings can fit in and do well in this universe. The plot formula made all of this possible. But you see, the thing is this. Star Trek did not invent plot formula. Plot formulae have been around ever since people first started telling stories, ever since the first time somebody said, "Once upon a time." And as a matter of fact, I was wondering, would you mind if I told you one of my favorite Bible stories? It's a story of a woman who, for some reason, is unable to have children. And it's her fault, apparently. Don't tell me your story. There we go. It's her fault that she can't have children. But then, you see, she receives a message from God. A message that says, beyond all hope, beyond all expectation, she will be able to have a child. A son, it turns out. She reacts with surprise, with consternation, but this promise proves true. And she has a child, a boy, it turns out. And that child goes on to save the entire nation. It's a great story. A story that brings out these important truths about God and his relationship with his people and how he saves them. But the thing is this, the story I told you, whose story was it? Because I could have been telling you the story of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Or of Rebecca, the wife of Isaac. I could have been telling you the story of Rachel, the mother of Joseph, of Hannah, whose song we read this morning. I could have been telling you the story of Elizabeth, mother of John the Baptist. for that matter, even of Mary, the mother of Jesus. But of course, I wasn't telling you any of those stories. I was telling you the story of another woman, a woman who is not even named in the Bible, a woman we only know as the wife of Manoah and the mother of Samson. But my point is this: in a very significant way, the story of all of these women is the same story because it is told according to an ancient formula. A formula that the ancient people of Israel all understood. And they used this formula. And they took the stories that they knew and they applied this formula to them, because this formula brought out important truths to them. It brought out truths about God, and about God's commitment to his people and how God saves his people. It also told them important things about their society and how it worked, about the place of women within that society, the severe restrictions that were on women, but also the enormous potentials that was in women. Now, there is no avoiding the truth and the fact that ancient Israelite society was a society where the role of women was severely restricted. Women, with only a few significant exceptions, were not permitted to exercise leadership roles, were not permitted to own property, to earn a living. And these severe restrictions on the roles and activities of women no doubt created many problems. I mean, how many women were there in that society who could have done so much, who could have contributed so much, and yet they were not permitted to do so? How much did the society itself suffer as a result? So certainly this was not all good. But at the same time, there was a flip side to it. For this society recognized in particular the greatness that was in women in one particular role anyways. They recognized that in the role of motherhood, women did amazing things. And this wasn't, of course, without its problems, because, of course, if you had a woman who, for whatever reason, was unable to have a child, and let's be honest here, it pretty much had to be a male child, she suffered from that. She was looked down upon, she was devalued, and so there was definitely a negative side to that. And I would hardly take this whole attitude and apply it to our lives and our society today, and yet at the same time, there was the positive side to this. And there was this idea of all the good that came out of the role of women in that society and the role of mothers, and they appreciated that. And this formula was there for them to explore that, to recognize the greatness in mothers, to proclaim the truth that, yes, they can save the world in significant ways. So let's look at that formula and see what we can take from it and use and apply today. Let's look at it by looking at the story of one particular woman. The one, of course, who we cannot name. The one we can only know as Manoah's wife, or as Samson's mother. Yeah, maybe we don't know her name, but she was an amazing woman. And look at the story. It is quite clear from the way that the story is told that this woman is not a mere vessel. She's not a carrier. She is more than just something convenient available to bring this hero, Samson, into this world. She is given enormous responsibility. And when the angel comes to her and announces this news to her, he gives to her certain tasks that she and she alone can carry out. It is up to her. She has to follow a very strict diet. No wine, no grape products, no unclean food. And it is her that is given the responsibility of making sure that her child's hair is never cut. It's all up to her. In other words, it's up to her her son lives his whole life long as a Nazarite. That is somebody who was recognized in that society as having a special devotion, a special connection to God. And it's all up to her. Nobody else. Did you notice as we read the story how Manoah, the father, he tries to get in the middle of this? Manoah is not content that this message has merely come to his wife, and he insists on meeting this angel for himself. Because he seems to think that he also should have special instructions, and so he demands to know. He asks the angels, what is this boy's rule of life? What is he to do? Give me the instructions, he's demanding. But the angel says, no. This is not your business. The angel says merely, the woman needs to do what I told her. It is up to her and no one else. She is to do it. It's up to her. And I think that this is a recognition of the incredible things that mothers can do for their children. Incredible things. And I know that this is not something that is merely exclusive to mothers. I mean, of course it is true that children raised by single fathers, children raised in other family configurations, can do well, can thrive in this world because of what they are given. Yet at the same time, we got to acknowledge there is something about mothers, what they can do, and what they can pass on to their children. Something well worth celebrating on a day like today. The key thing I see that Samson's mother gives to him is an understanding and a view of the greatness that is in him. Because you see, it is her alone who is told of what Samson can do, of who he can be, and she believes it. Once again, Manoah, he tries to get in the middle of this. He speaks to the angel. He asks him, what is this boy to do? I want to know the greatness in him, but the angel refuses. No. This responsibility is the mother's. She is the one who will teach him the greatness that is in him. Let me ask you, how many of you are only the person you are today, have only accomplished the things that you have accomplished in your life because you knew that somebody believed in you, that somebody believed that you could do it? Now, I don't know who that person was for you. Maybe it was your mother. Perhaps your father, maybe a sibling, a friend. Who doesn't necessarily matter. But how could any of us do it if we didn't know that somebody out there believed in us, believed we could do it? How often is that the mother who passes that wonderful gift on to her children? But there's something else that Samson's mother gives to her son, something even more essential as far as I can see. She gives to him a certain perspective on life, a certain way of looking at the world. And you see this in particular in the contrast between Manoah and his wife. Manoah has a perspective on the world. And when Manoah finally figures out who he has been dealing with here, who has been sending these messages to him, and he figures it out in this wonderful scene that's beautifully depicted on the front of our bulletins of the sacrifice. And as the flames go up into heaven, the angel goes up in the flames, and suddenly Manoah realizes who he has been dealing with here. He has been dealing with God. And as soon as he realizes this, Manoah is filled with fear. And he cries out, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." He is terrified. And that is because Manoah has a certain understanding of God, a certain image of God. And the God that he sees is a God who is terrible and frightening and angry and vindictive. And because of that view of God, whenever Manoah thinks of the possibility of dealing with this God, he's terrified. For he is convinced that this God must be out to get him. And I've got to admit that I have known many people in my life, many people who see God exactly like Manoah does. They are convinced that God is their enemy, that God is out to get them. And that is why, for example, they cannot let go of their regret for past failures and mistakes. It is why they carry around their guilt with them like a garment. They're convinced that God is their enemy. God is out to get them. It's not a great way to live, because it's like you're constantly living with this feeling that, whatever good is in your life, whatever wonderful things are there, they might just disappear, they might fall away, just like that. And the worst part is that they feel like they deserve it. It's a frightening way to live, with God as your enemy. And you know what? It's inescapable. Once you get that mode of thinking into your mind, you can't get away from it. And even if people disavow God altogether, decide that God must not exist, and after all, who would want to believe in the God that they imagine? They can't let go of it. And they'll start to say it in different ways. The universe is against me, the world is out to get me, but it means the same thing. And that's why it is so essential to have someone in your life, and especially at an early age, who gives you a different perspective, a different way of seeing God. And Manoah's wife, she has that different way of seeing God. As Manoah melts away with fear and terror at the idea of dealing with God, she replies completely differently. And she says, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands. He wouldn't have shown us these things. He wouldn't have told us these things. She sees God differently, and I am convinced that it was her and not Manoah who taught Samson how to see God and set the foundation in Samson's life where he could live his life, his whole life long, in perfect dependence on God, trusting God so much that Samson was even able to draw his physical strength from his relationship with God. No one can live like that in dependence on God unless they have an understanding of a God who is full of grace. And I believe that Samson learned to see God that way from his mother. Certainly not from his father. So yeah, on this day we do celebrate mothers. They are amazing. I know they're not perfect. I know they make their mistakes. We all do. But where would we be with them? They give us so much. They tell us who we are. They see the greatness in us. They believe in us sometimes when we can't believe in ourselves. They teach us to see the grace of God. And yeah, I want to say it. They saved the world. Let's spend a few moments in silent reflection. Thank you, God, for the amazing people you send into our lives. Tell us who we are. Who teach us greatness. Who expect great things in us, from us, and believe in us. Who teach us to see you as you truly are.